There's a scene where the villain is like pretending to choke somebody and then he actually chokes somebody, and that's usually the spot where I was like,
yeah.
this is so weird. I think I'm going to turn this off.
I'll showcase this. It's like a little Hitchcock watch. It's got the Hitchcock like silhouette on it.
Oh my gosh.
I got it from that class that I took. I had to show that off because I haven't broken it out in years. And I realized
you're such a nerd.
you must keep the time. Hey, you wouldn't even notice if I didn't push it.
I know. No,
So,
I appreciate it. You've gone all out on this episode, and I
also, I'll just point it out right now because it's about to be gone, but I'm drinking a dirty martini right now because dirty martinis are what they drink in North by Northwest, which is actually playing on mute just behind my screen right now. So.
All right. Hey, gang. Welcome back to my channel. It's been a long time. I haven't had any content for like 3 months, but we are back with probably the best discussion that I will have all year. I'm very excited for this. We're going to be talking about our top 5 Alfred Hitchcock movies of all time that we think should be the top 5 list. And I brought back one of my favorite guests who, again, I don't think you've been on since like 2020, Donovan. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Kelly. It's been a spell, as the Southerners would say. But I am like super excited that you asked me to talk about this because Hitchcock, as I think a lot of people who take film seriously would say, is one of my favorite filmmakers. And I've given a lot of thought to some of his. This was a fun little shock to the system because I hadn't really listed out my favorite Hitchcock films in a while. So.
Yeah, I like pretty much all last summer I was on like a Hitchcock binge. There was a coworker I had who had been like mass recommending Hitchcock movies. So I was watching like his list and I was watching a bunch of other ones. And I just kind of became a mini fanatic, I guess. It's not like my favorite films of all time, but they're pretty close. Like there's a lot of really good stuff there. And I really have an appreciation for old style films because my biggest complaint with like modern day filmmaking is it relies too heavily on CGI and external factors as opposed to just tell the story. And Hitchcock has a lot of great examples of just telling the story with what he has available to him at the time.
I was going to say you did a deep dive on the HCU, the Hitchcock Cinematic Universe, which actually I don't think even applies because I don't know if all of them take place in the same universe. But one thing that I am constantly reminded of with Hitchcock, like whenever I break out, I've got like a whole volume of his movies over here, and then a few singular DVDs of like things like Notorious or North by Northwest. But the thing that always strikes me is that there's so many Hitchcock movies, and there are so many good Hitchcock movies, and it's like you kind of have to categorize. It would be interesting. If I were to redo this, I would almost maybe even categorize them by decade because they're so extensive throughout time.
I was just thinking about that too, because we'll get to our selections in a second, but just based on my selection, I was just like, so many of them are like pre-1940s almost. And then 2 of my favorites are like getting into the 60s. And it's funny how only one of mine is in color. So I just think that again, just kind of shows you how he was able to make something really scary without having a lot of the elements that we now have for movie making back in as opposed to back in the day. So let's get into go ahead.
Just to cap that, what you're talking about, I think, is he was like somebody who used those elements of cinema like in a meaningful way. So there's actually quite a few special effects. He used a lot of special effects in his movies. There's a lot of matte shots. There's a lot of miniature work that maybe if you're not like looking for it, you wouldn't even notice. But it's sort of Christopher Nolan. I feel like is in a little bit of a valley right now in terms of some of his stuff, and I'm not as big a fan of Christopher Nolan as I used to be, and I'd even have to re-examine sort of what I was a fan of with him. But he is a very good filmmaker, and Christopher Nolan, I think, is sort of the comparable. He and Denis Villeneuve are kind of maybe the comparable filmmakers to that sort of style where you're integrating things that are like CGI or matte paintings or even black and white, or color, and you're using them to sort of help the story. It's
Mhm.
all like kind of it works along. It's not just for the spectacle of it, which
Yeah.
we can even explore that because in North by Northwest, I mean, it's the climax takes place on the top of the Mount
Mount
Rushmore,
Rushmore. Yeah.
but still, it's like you just kind of get a sense that there's a meaningfulness behind it
Mhm.
or purpose. Dare I say? I don't know. I might have to defend that if it's put under a microscope.
Yeah. All right. So I'm really excited to see what's on your list in comparison with what's on my list because I think
So
I
are
can
we
guess
going
a
from
few of them.
five? Are we going from bottom to
We're
top?
going from bottom to top. So
Okay, yeah,
five, we'll
makes
we'll
sense.
save whatever we think is the best for the last one. And I will also leave room because I've got so many honorable mentions, but we're just going to go through 1 through 4 and then we'll talk about some honorable mentions and then we'll do the top one as the finale kind of. I can't remember. There's a channel that specifically has that as their format for all their videos.
Yes.
And I just like to, no need to reinvent the wheel. I say
You
this at
gotta
work all
build
the
it up.
time. Yeah, we got to build
You
up the
gotta.
momentum.
Yeah.
Make the excitement. All right. So I am just going to rattle off my number 5 is Strangers on a Train. And it's not for the reasons that everybody thinks, because I had a
Mhm.
hard time getting through that movie. I watched about 50% of it years ago and I was like,
Switched
I
to it.
don't like this. This is so weird. And I turned it off. And there's been a couple other times where I've done that, where I've just watched half of it and then it gets weird. There's a scene where the villain is like pretending to choke somebody and then he actually chokes somebody, and that's usually the spot where I
Oh,
was like,
yeah.
this is so weird, I think I'm going to turn this off. So that's about the point that it would lose me. So finally I pushed through it last
Mm.
year and it's so good. The last half is the good stuff. You really have to just be willing to commit to the movie and get to the good stuff at the end. And
Yeah.
this is a spoiler-filled podcast. I will just say the ending of that movie, when the merry-go-round is exploding, I have to say I was dying laughing. My brother was dying laughing. I was watching it with my family. Everybody was just losing it. So that's that is number 5 for me.
I I remember sitting down and I don't know when I first saw it, but I one of the distinct viewings I have in memory is when one of my sisters was visiting me in California and I was like, "Oh, let's watch Strangers on a Train."
Mhm.
So, it was but I remember specifically laughing in like a good way, like
Yeah.
it made me feel good, not like I was laughing at the movie so much, but like that part where the merry-go-round is going out of control and people are like, "Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do?" And then that one old guy just steps forward. He's like this grizzled old maintenance guy, and he's just like,
Mhm.
"I'll do it." And
Yes.
like just it's the it's like such a meme of just like the most reliable kind of like just the the most reliable fellow who like you're thank God he's there.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of guy that you want in every situation. It's that he's the kind of person who won World War II.
Yeah.
So and it's such a I mean one of the things, and we can get into this more as the stuff goes on. I took a class on Hitchcock at
Mhm.
USC, and it was one of the classes. Like there was the Spielberg class and there was the Hitchcock class. And I remember one of the things about the Spielberg class was Spielberg would come and talk, and it was like,
Yeah.
okay, at the time I would have been excited, maybe not so much. Well, no, Spielberg's still good, but
Yeah.
the Hitchcock class, I almost found it to be more meaningful because I just one, the teacher who's teaching it is like he was the chair of the Hitchcock Foundation.
Mhm.
So he really knew Hitchcock. And I think he had even met him at one point. I can't remember. He was like old Hollywood. He had
Mhm.
hobnobbed with he was the former Jesuit priest, left the order, was gay, was like very theatrical. I think exercised to show tunes every morning. Drew
Uh-huh.
Casper, you can look him up. He's hilarious. And a lot of these movies have his commentary. But one of the things that he talked about in that class was that Hitchcock would take, and there's a German word for it. I need to go into my notes and actually find it because I haven't been able to find it.
Mhm.
It's the concept of taking something that's very ordinary or very like every day, just you wouldn't take as threatening and then turning it into something that's very, very threatening or scary. And
Yeah.
Hitchcock does this a lot. And the merry-go-round is an example of that, where it's like, oh, merry-go-round, children love it. Like my
Right.
niece was on a merry-go-round the other day. I wouldn't have thought about anything dangerous happening.
Yeah.
But what if the mechanism breaks and it goes out of control and then it turns into like this
It's
weird
also something, it's not
subterfuge?
just about it being like something ordinary and everyday. That particular symbol is more like a symbol of childhood, symbol of
Yes.
happiness,
Yeah.
positivity, and all of a sudden it just becomes this horror. And
It
also, but
perverts
it's
it.
so exaggerated, it's hilarious to me.
Yeah, it really perverts it to be something that's like, wow, like if that really, I mean, people die on roller coasters
Right.
and amusement park rides all the time, and it's horrifying. I think part of why it's horrifying is because it's almost such a like unnecessary activity that is supposed to be so joyful, like everybody's screaming and like,
Mhm.
enjoy like when they're on a thing like that. So so that's one of the things that I find really interesting about Strangers on a Train. But I will say also, I'm a person who enjoys like a good kind of, what's the word? It's like a trickster villain.
Mhm.
Somebody
Yeah.
who's like a villain who's like very merry and mirthful, and
Yeah.
like is almost somebody that you could imagine meeting at a party, and you would be like, wow, I really want to be friends with this person.
Honestly,
And
I
then
think we have a mutual friend who's like
probably. Living in LA for long enough, you definitely meet these people. But they're enigmatic and they're
Yeah.
magnetic, and you wanna be their friend, and then over time, you start to realize, "Ooh, this person is sort of dangerous."
Yeah.
And that villain, the main character, I can't remember his name in the movie,
Bruno, I
he's very
think.
much that way. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
like a total psychopath,
Yeah.
and he's the sort of guy who has like, he's glib, he's charming, he's, like, talking to the senator about, like, plans to go to the moon, or, like, how we can get to
Yeah.
the moon and
He's
stuff,
so
and
dead serious in his delivery
yeah,
too. Like he's just like he's very eager and he's like, "Yeah, we are
yeah.
gonna do this." He's the ultimate salesman, but for some really disturbing and distorted plans.
And he's a total wastrel, like, he
Yeah.
doesn't do anything, he's living off his family fortune. He's curious about everything, but he doesn't really substantiate it with anything, and you realize this is the kind of person who would be, like, the perfect internet huckster nowadays, because he's
Yeah.
the kinda guy who can talk for hours on end on certain things that are very surface level but seem meaningful to people. But
Mhm.
then when you actually, like, if the senator was to actually sit down with him and try to, I think even the senator can pick up in the moment, like,
Yeah.
that this guy's weird, like, I
Yeah,
should stay
he
away from
goes
him.
I actually just rewatched the movie, so he goes
Yeah,
over to somebody else at the party after he finishes talking to him. He's like, "That guy's very strange," or something to that effect.
yeah,
Like, who invited him?" Kinda, and he
yeah,
shows
yeah.
up at the party uninvited too, which is
Right,
also
right.
he just starts to ingratiate initially. So for the people who haven't seen the movie, but don't care if I spoil it,
Bruno, is that his
this is
name?
the whole premise of the movie is a guy is getting a divorce from his wife who is basically trying to blackmail him. He's very angry at his wife and he runs into this stranger on a train who says, "You know what? You're having problems with your wife and I'm having problems with my father. What if I kill your wife and you kill my father?" And he's just completely down with this whole thing and the guy
Yeah,
is like he must be crazy or he's joking or whatever.
yeah.
That nobody thinks like this. And so he just kind of writes it off and goes off and the story develops and well the guy ends up going and killing his wife for him and he shows up he's like hey I killed your wife for you now you need to go and do my murder and so it just trouble ensues and the guy initially kind of stays away from him calling him and then sending him messages reminding him hey you need to follow through on this and the other guy is just like I'm under investigation for a murder I didn't commit and this guy's harassing me and I'll be incriminated if I tell them that I know that this guy did it all this stuff. And so then he just starts showing up at his parties. He starts showing up at his house. He starts showing up when he's on a date with his girlfriend, like all this other stuff. And so it just gets weirder and weirder. And then finally, the Bruno, the villain, finally ultimately realizes that this guy is never going to be willing to follow through and kill his father for him. And so he's like, I'm going to get back at him now because I don't like that I have a murder on my conscience that I didn't actually get anything out of. So ultimately, at the end of the movie, he's going to plant evidence to make it look like the other guy actually committed the crime. And so there's this big scramble of who's going to get to the scene of the crime first to kind of bring it all home, basically. And so I won't spoil it entirely, but there's a merry-go-round explosion at the end that I just love. So
Well, yeah, that's the Hitchcock always delivers on like a pretty good climax. Like he knew how to, kind of make it spectacular. Um and yeah, Strangers on a Train, it's one of those movies that's very clean
yeah.
out of Hitchcock's. Like it doesn't have it's sort of grounded. I just remember the styles. It's been years since I've watched it. I tried to watch as much as I could before, but there's so many, and like trying to a lot of it just is reliant on like memory of the story
Yeah.
and essentially. But yes, there's a great actually. So if anybody's interested in the comedic side of this story, there's a great parody that they do of it. That's like it's not like a parody the way that like Airplane or Scary Movie would be a parody, but it's essentially taking the same story and making it comedic. And it's called Throw Mama from the Train, and it's got Danny DeVito and Billy Crystal, and it's basically like Danny DeVito is like a mama's boy who's like his mom's like a tyrant, and Billy Crystal has like a nightmare ex-wife, and he's a screenwriter, and they meet on like they meet, and basically like Danny DeVito's delusional, but it's much more sort of innocent in a way, if that can be said. Like Danny DeVito's not like he's more just a like he's detached from reality. He's not like like meaning to do harm. But yeah, so that they in terms of like movies, it's been because they've remade a couple Hitchcock movies with kind of mediocre premises, like Rear Window was remade into like Disturbia, and like that was not great. But this I would say just it just puts a whole new spin on it that's kind of neat and fun.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So now I'm going to toss it over to you. I feel like I'm setting the
All right.
tone with my number 5, but let's hear what your number 5 is.
So my number 5 is Shadow of a Doubt.
Mhm.
And I will say Shadow of a Doubt has always been one of my favorites. And actually, at one point, it was near number one, and it used to contend with Rebecca for number one. But over the years, so I'll say what I love about it first. Joseph Cotton is great.
Mhm.
Um, the plot is essentially that there's this young woman, or I mean, she's essentially a girl. She's like teenager. I think she'd maybe graduated high school. So, but she lives in, I think it's Santa Ana. Yeah, it's Santa Ana,
Mhm.
California. And the layout of the town and everything, the way that they actually shot it in Santa Ana, it's like the classic Main Street America that you want to live in, like the kind
Mhm.
of Main Street America where the houses, like the suburban areas, are not far from the actual town square. You just get a sense of like community and everything. It's kind of Hitchcock, I think, was making a statement by setting it
Mhm.
there, even in the 50s, or no, it was like the late 40s when they shot it. Might have even been early 40s, but either way, he was painting the picture of this like kind of set aside American town that was like not necessarily like super progressive or anything. Like it wasn't like it was on the up and up, up and up, but like it was
Mhm.
like things were it was self sufficient and everything.
Mhm.
So she's extremely bored with her existence there and is looking for somebody to kind of shake her out of it. He's looking for
Mhm.
like an adventure and all this stuff. And her dad's a banker and her mom's a housewife, and she's kind of critical of these like roles that they've taken on, and like essentially criticizes them for just sort of settling into their lives, even though
Mhm.
they've probably given her like a very good life beyond what they
Right.
have when they grew up. And she is obsessed with this idea of her uncle Charlie, who's sort of traveling, like a world traveler.
Mhm.
And she is, I think at one point they get a message that he's coming to town, and she's very excited by this. And it's like the hope that like this will like kind of shake her free of this like boredom. And it turns out that like there's a much darker undertone to that whole thing than she originally, and it's sort of a loss of innocence, and this whole experience that like, having Uncle Charlie come to visit is, I won't spoil it, but it becomes a very like kind of dark thing.
Yeah.
And it's very specific to her, like she has to kind of live with it. So
Well, I also remember, so his name is Charlie. Isn't her name
her
like
name's,
Charlotte? She was named after.
yeah,
Yeah.
she may have been named after him. They call her Charlie.
Yeah.
I don't, and the mom is like, the mom loves her brother. Like the
Mhm.
mom is like very much like they all seem to have this idea of who Uncle Charlie is. And
Mhm.
by all means, he's like very handsome guy, well
Yeah.
dressed, like experienced with the world, a bachelor, like it's exciting. But once again, kind of like what we were talking about, Bruno, although it's a little bit less, well, Uncle Charlie's actually kind of a similar character to Bruno, because when you
Yeah.
actually pay attention to the red flags that are popping up as his
Mhm.
character like becomes more and more known, it's disturbing.
Yeah.
And there's a couple scenes where he says stuff or he does things that you're like, that's not really normal. But because it's a
Yeah.
good looking person and he's popular, you kind of let it slide.
Yeah,
And
I
like kind of
think
like if you were,
the one
yeah,
difference with Bruno there is just that Bruno kind of, you can tell that something's off right away, as opposed
yeah,
to Charlie. You can tell he's hiding something, but
uh-huh,
like you said, kind of he looks very different than Bruno. He's clean
yeah,
cut, he looks like he's a successful guy. He's somebody that you'd expect to see in like, small town America, or maybe middle to upper middle class America type of guy. And he could never do something that would be underhanded or bad. Bruno, on the other hand, is kind of weird looking and kind of weird sounding.
Bruno's kind of a child.
Yeah.
I would almost say he's kind of stuck in this like Arrested Development, whereas
Hmm.
it's implied that like I think Uncle Charlie, I think, was hit by a car when he was a kid, and like
Hmm.
it's sort of a John Wayne Gacy kind of thing, which I think that might be a theory on why John Wayne Gacy was the way that he was. That trauma to the brain when you're young could possibly turn you into more of a sociopath.
Hmm.
And anyways, it's really good. And one of the reasons I used to love watching it is because I love old California. Like I love
Hmm.
like 1940s, 1930s California, like Chinatown. Another very dark story, but I'll watch it really for the atmosphere and the
Hmm.
feel of the movie. But I'm always kind of I'm hesitant to show it to anybody because the ending is so dark.
Hmm.
Shadow of a Doubt, I initially would watch because I love like I used to go to Orange, California, which is in
Hmm.
Orange County, and it's where Chapman College is, and or Chapman University, and it was very much similar to the way that like they preserved this town the way that this Santa Ana was, and I
Hmm.
just loved it. Now over the years, I have come to sort of, I think, gain a deeper understanding of like the story in Shadow of a Doubt, and it's made it less enjoyable to watch because
Hmm.
there's like just the darkness. It really is a bit of a descent. And even though Hitchcock does what he usually does, he gives you like a romantic storyline to sort of bring it up a little bit. At
Hmm.
the end of the story, there is a loss of innocence that you just can't turn back the clock on. And you realize that it's sort of the moral of the story. It's like no matter where you are, that darkness could always find you. And
Hmm.
they've even done just this small tangent. I'm trying to keep my tangents to a minimum here, but like they've done a study on psychopaths and sociopaths. Probably, actually, psychopath would be the one because that's like born with it. And they found that like even like places where are that are secluded, that are like mountain towns that like aren't necessarily impacted by like very bad things, or
Hmm.
it's just sort of normal life, that there are still psychopaths there, and they think
Hmm.
that biologically, like from an evolution standpoint, that's the reason for that is that it's to prepare people for like the worst aspect of humanity that exists outside the town,
Hmm.
or outside the community. So that's sort of the I guess the lesson of Shadow of a Doubt is that, like, yeah, like you could live in the perfect little small town America. You know, we could always go back to small town America, but there's always going to be something, some evil lurking that's going to
There's
try
always
to.
going to be that person.
Yeah, you always have to be vigilant, and you also have to be. I mean, you know, it's brilliant. I mean, you have to be vigilant even in your own families and stuff. It's like nobody wants to be that,
Yeah.
but it's just the reality of things is that every time something bad happens, people are always like, well, I would have never guessed that that person was that
Right.
way. And it's like, well, unfortunately, for whatever reason, whether it's psychological or just a gradual decline, people turn to evil, you know?
Well, it also, I think, because I work in an industry that has a lot of dark themes, I guess, or like I deal with like the subject of sexual abuse
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
lot, and often what happens, one of the recurring themes, statistically, all that kind of stuff, um, it's always, or I should say, generally, when there's sexual abuse, when there's any kind of abuse, it's usually going to be somebody close to home. It's
Hmm.
very rare that somebody's going to be assaulted by an all-out stranger. It's more likely that it's going to be somebody who sees you around or somebody that you interact with on a regular basis. And
Yeah.
so I think that that's interesting. It is almost like, I don't know that Hitchcock meant it this way, but it's almost like a warning to the audience saying, hey, the bad stuff happens a lot closer to home than we like to think it is. We like to think of kind of the generic, stereotypical bad guy in a cape who's a complete stranger.
Or the guy with,
Yeah,
like, big glasses and the
exactly.
pedophile mustache.
Yeah, yeah. So like
Classic, you
it's
know?
usually it's like I said, it's usually a lot more close to home than people want to admit.
Yeah. Well, and that is, I mean, I don't like to get into, sometimes I think people have this unhealthy, like, obsession with, like, delving into the psychosexual kind of aspects of
Mhm.
some of these films and stuff, but I definitely think, like, there's got to be some meaning behind, like, Charlie is developing into a young woman and she
Mhm.
sort of sees her uncle as, like, you know, this man who's, like, you know, desirable to the world, and, like, she
Mhm.
wants him around just because, like, you know, I mean, that's just, it's exciting. And essentially there is, I could definitely see it. I don't know what Hitchcock may have said about it, but it could be a metaphor for, you know, um it probably is a metaphor for
Yeah.
that kind of thing, because I mean, a lot of this has biological meaning. Like, a lot of the stories we tell, even vampires and, like, you know, werewolves, even the most fantastical elements, they, you can always draw them back to, like, oh, that's gotta be, like, you know, either somebody who, like, kind of drains you of your, like,
Mhm.
emotional life, you know, kind of thing,
Yeah.
or somebody who is like only kind of lurks by night and does what they do by night, or, like, you know, just, or like the most animalistic aspects, even like watching
Or
The
yeah,
Northman,
there's so
you
many
know?
different people that you'll run into in real life who are one way with one group of
Yeah,
people and another way with another group of people, or
right, right.
even just depending on the setting, their personality changes so drastically. And I
Jekyll
think
and Hyde.
we see that a lot
Yeah.
throughout Hitchcock's movies. So we've spent a lot of time on number five. So I'm
Okay,
gonna move
sorry,
us
sorry.
on.
Okay,
No,
yes,
it's all
you
good.
be the timekeeper, because
I
if
am the
I'm
timekeeper.
left to my devices, also my watch is broken, which, but I'll
Okay.
showcase this. This is a, it's like a little Hitchcock watch. It's got
Mhm.
the Hitchcock, like, silhouette on it.
Oh my
Because
gosh.
I got it from that class that I took. I had to show that off because I haven't broken it out in years, and I
You're
realized it
such
was
a nerd.
important. Like,
Let me
you
hear
must
about it.
keep the time. Hey, you wouldn't even notice if I didn't point it
I
out to
know.
you.
No, I
So, but
appreciate it. You've gone all out on this
the
episode, and
the
I'm here
occasion
for it.
seemed to call for it. But yes, I
You are the
nerd.
you are the most committed guest, and this is why you keep coming back, as you are the most committed guest to all of these topics, and I
Also,
appreciate
I'll
that.
just point it out right now because it's about to be gone, but I'm drinking a
Yeah.
dirty martini right now because dirty
Mm.
martinis are what they drink in North by Northwest, which is
Oh,
actually
okay.
playing on mute just behind my screen right now. So,
There you go. All right, so my number 4, which I think you've already kind of given away that it's your number 1, but we'll see if that's changed over the years. But my number 4 is actually Rebecca.
yes,
So
Rebecca.
I watch this movie, and this is one of the things I love about Hitchcock movies just generally. It's very hard for me to sit down in front of a movie and actually be legitimately scared. And so all of my top ones, except for Strangers on a Train, are ones that I actually had a moment of genuine fear, I guess. And this is definitely one of them because this one is so creepy. The is it titular? The titular character or
Yeah.
the namesake of the movie doesn't exist in the movie at all. And but she basically haunts the movie because she's dead. No spoilers. You find that out within like 30 seconds at the beginning of the movie.
They
But
were all dead. We find that out. Yeah. Bruce
there you
Willis
go.
comes
Yeah.
up and all this. They were all
But I think that's one of the main things that I find that is just genius about this particular story is the character, the namesake of the movie, and it's also a book, is dead the entire movie. But you are more scared of her than you are of anything else in this movie, except for perhaps the housekeeper who's obsessed with her. But she kind of fills in that physical void of the fact that Rebecca is not there. So it's a fantastic movie to me. This is the first time I ever saw Sir Laurence Olivier in a movie, was watching Rebecca, and so I just was blown away by him.
wow.
There's a scene
Yeah.
about halfway through where he's literally telling the story of Rebecca's death, and he's just narrating, and the camera is like going around the room.
Yeah.
Like she was on the couch here and then she got up here and the camera's just following where he's telling the story, and nothing, and the main the leading lady, who by the way has no name other than the second Mrs. De Winter.
Yeah.
We have no idea what her real name is outside of that. She just kind of we follow the story through her eyes all the way up until that point, and then she hands it off to Sir Laurence Olivier, who tells us the story, and then she becomes part of the audience and is watching the story, and then she ends up kind of breaking the trance at the end. She's all, "But you didn't kill her," or whatever it is that she says, and she breaks the kind of the spell. But there's this. I just was blown away the first time I saw that scene. I was just like, there's a reason this one won the Academy Award. This is storytelling on fire. Did not need special effects, didn't need anything other than that strategic camera and the incredible voice of Sir Laurence Olivier. So that's my story, and I yield back to the chair.
That's your story, and you're sticking to it. Okay, so Rebecca is one of my favorites, and we'll reveal. Well, okay, so anyways, just to comment on what you've commented on, one thing about that scene where Laurence Olivier is talking about the death. The one thing that always sticks with me with that scene, this just shows what a like materialistic person I am, is the way he smokes. Is so particular. Like he puffs a cigarette and he like blows out a little, and then he blows that little puff of smoke out with like the full breath. And I want to say I've tried to do this a couple of different times, and I just fail. And it's the sort of thing that, one, it's like a perfect encapsulation of like stress, because I'm pretty sure with stress you like take in like a short breath and then a long breath. And like people will find that they do this when they cry. Hopefully whoever's listening to this isn't crying right now, but it's almost like the reverse that. But okay, so getting back to the actual cinematic thing of it, one, Laurence Olivier, the funny thing about this is that it was shortly, I don't want to say it was shortly after he entered Hollywood, but he was a stage actor before he was a film actor. And I remember reading at one point, and it may have been in Vivian Lee's autobiography, biography that is, where they talk about how he like had a lot of trouble initially because he was projecting too much. Like he would project to the back, which in stage you're supposed to do, but not film. And this was like, I think, one of the movies where he really hit his mark as an actor in being able to just like perform for the camera as opposed to perform for the audience. And I mean, I guess perform for the audience through the camera. But that scene is amazing. And I do remember the first time I saw it being like, when I saw what Hitchcock was doing with the camera, being like, oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Like he's real, like he's using, yeah, like and people don't really, if people want to know what cinema is, like when Martin Scorsese, the debate about like whether Marvel movies are cinema is kind of a silly one, because I think he may
Mhm.
have been speaking off the cuff, and I'm not the biggest Scorsese fan, but you'll hear people always talk about cinema or the language of cinema. And essentially, that is cinema. It's
Mhm.
using the actual aspects of filmmaking to their best extent. And with Hitchcock, he was like, hey, I can use this camera to
Yeah.
communicate that, like, this is what happened, or to almost make it like a ghost, like walking through the room.
Yeah,
And
it
it,
really is.
and then one thing, the other thing that I always remember with Rebecca is the brilliance of one. I had a huge crush on Joan Fontaine when I was like younger. I don't know
Yeah.
why. She kind of gets on my nerves nowadays, but I'm not saying like she gets on my nerves in this movie. But like
Yeah.
I find Olivia de Havilland, ironically your sister, to be a little bit more enjoyable
Mhm.
nowadays, which just shows, I guess, tastes evolve. But I remember watching this movie a lot and realizing one thing, that in the set design, they in the sets that they built, the doors were all a little bit like higher than she was, like the
Mhm.
doorknobs and stuff. Like she almost seems like a child walking
Yeah.
through the world
Mhm.
that Max de Winter is in. And it's all very gothic. Like I don't know exactly what the mainstays of gothic storytelling are, but
Yeah.
like this to me almost seemed like an update on Jane Eyre. Like it's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, like she marries the guy, she marries like Mr. Darcy, so to speak,
Yeah.
and then it turns out that Mr. Darcy, and obviously it's not Mr. Darcy and Jane Eyre, but like the perfect guy. And then it turns out like, oh, he's got a wife in the attic. And in
Yeah.
this case, Max de Winter's wife is his former wife, who's like,
Yeah.
a very interesting person. Let's just put it that way. But I
Yeah.
would highly recommend this movie, especially if you're just getting into Hitchcock, because it's not really your typical Hitchcock movie. It's like,
Yeah.
it's more of a romantic, like I said, gothic
Almost kind of a
fairy tale.
tragedy even
Yeah.
because
Yeah, a little
just
bit, yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's basically it's there's just so many things I could throw into this conversation, but like I
Yeah.
said, it's storytelling on steroids. And I'm not saying I don't like CGI. I'm not saying I don't like any of that. But I have a greater appreciation when you can just use the things that are available around you. Even at the end when he's talking about, and then she fell on the floor and he accidentally like leans back and the door hits the
Yeah.
back of the wall, just little things like that, because then it makes it sound like you're hearing the ghost fall on the floor, basically, as you were saying
Well,
earlier.
I always appreciate, and I mean, there are some I'm open to when the situation calls for it. Like you say, like when the situation calls for CGI, it's like by all means use
Right.
CGI.
Yeah.
Although I'm sure a lot of the CGI artists out there, from as what we've been hearing from like She-Hulk discourse and all this stuff, a lot of them would appreciate maybe filmmakers using practical effects more often so that
Yeah.
they didn't have as heavy a workload. But uh you know, what some of my favorite storytelling moments in film where a character is expositing a story that isn't really like bad exposition, because it's just them telling you what they've experienced. And
Mhm.
there's a couple ways of doing that. You can either show it in a flashback, or you can show it like, or you can do it with them telling it like a story around a campfire. And two instances where this is done pretty well is Steven Spielberg with Jaws, the
Mhm.
Quint scene where he tells the story about the ship going down, the sharks, and like delivering the atom bomb and all that stuff. It's haunting and it's so effective. And it's one is the performance from Robert Shaw, and the rest is like the atmosphere. They're out on the ocean. There's this unknown danger under the water, and there are
Mhm.
whales like, making noises in the distance and stuff. And it's like you say, it's like using the elements of the scene to just
Mhm.
kind of communicate what the essence is without actually just showing it to you. And it's just so effective. It doesn't always work, but there have been a bunch of instances where it does work. If you want to watch, like, check out The Patriot, where Mel Gibson talks about like why he, doesn't tell his children about what happened at Fort Wilderness, and they could have cut back to a flashback. Sometimes they may have been doing this out of like an effort to like save money and not like, but you'll find a lot of directors, they love to shoot that kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, oh, I can shoot a scene from the French and Indian War. Oh, I can shoot like a shipwreck scene. Sure, like I'll do it. But it shows a certain amount of restraint and discipline to actually just let it play and let the performance play. Let the story, like, it's storytelling at its essence.
Yeah.
Kind of realize.
It kind of goes back to the principle of less is more. And they say that in cooking all the time.
Yeah,
and they say that in filmmaking, less is very oftentimes more. But let's hear what your number 4 is, because I'm very curious.
Okay.
I like that we're fairly on the same page so far on our selection. So
we are, although I might surprise you because I kind of had my world rocked a little bit. And, like, this is just to preface all this. It's up for debate. You can, if you really want to. I don't know how you.
No, this is. Are you kidding me, Donovan? This is the end. This is the last conversation anybody will ever have on Hitchcock. This is where it ends. There are no other opinions that are acceptable.
It would be hilarious if the world ended like a minute after this podcast, and they just like, well, I guess
we'll just have to keep it going forever.
Let's find these in the vaults wherever they kept these. Okay, so 4, I'm going to say North by Northwest.
Okay.
And the reason I say that, there was a bit of a knife fight going on in my head between North by Northwest and 39 Steps. And I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. I watched 39 Steps, I think, last year around the fall, because I was watching a lot of Hitchcock around Halloween. And I was really pleased with it. Robert Donat is a highly underrated and highly underrepresented actor in Hollywood, and mainly due to the fact that he had such bad asthma that kept him from taking roles. I still have to see his version of Kind of Monte Cristo, but he was in line to like become a huge star, but because his asthma was so bad, he had trouble performing, and he had especially had trouble performing athletic stuff on film. So my theory is that 39 Steps, that North by Northwest is essentially a remake of 39 Steps.
And which Hitchcock did a lot of remakes of his previous movies, and either gave them the same name or a different name.
And it's not necessarily like remakes beat for beat. I mean, you could probably break them down and find some similarities, but they talk about this in Rebecca, actually, and I think it might be a self-reflexive contemplation on his own art, where Rebecca tells Max de Winter, oh yeah, my father, he was an artist, and he would just paint the same tree like over and over again, but he would do it from different angles. And I remember my teacher, Drew Casper at USC, he talked about how a lot of directors, a lot of auteurs do things, is that you'll find them making the same film over and over again, kind of seeking to perfect it, but it's almost like a remake in everything but name only.
Yeah.
And like Michael Mann is a great example of this. Like, if you look at Michael Mann's work, so much of it is just cops and robbers. It's just like he's kind of remaking that like heist film, or that like, the cop and the robber over and over again. So,
or even like Frank Capra has done this too with Mr. Deeds Goes to Town and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington came after Mr. Deeds, but is the better movie, in my opinion. My very correct opinion.
I mean, one of my favorite directors, Mel Gibson, like, he made Braveheart, and you can see a lot of elements of the passion in Braveheart. Like, there's Christian elements to the character of William Wallace, and you can, and it's not hilariously obvious, which is the good thing. Whereas like Zack Snyder with Man of Steel, like interjecting like all this like kind of Christ-like imagery with Superman, it's a little like, okay, Zach, like, we get it. Jesus, like, but whereas like William Wallace, it's like, oh, I see that the thing that they're gonna disembowel him on is shaped like a cross. It makes sense that it's shaped like a cross because that's how you would lay somebody out typically, unless you just use a table. But like, I can't imagine that there wasn't some thought that went into that that reflects from Mel Gibson's Catholicism and Christianity. But digressing back to, or I guess going back to North by Northwest, I think North by Northwest, it's almost like this is where my subjectivity and objectivity run into a bit of a conflict, because I like 39 Steps, I think, more. I think I like the relationship between he and the woman more in 39 Steps. I find it to be a little bit more authentic. And I also just like the feel of the movie a little bit more. But North by Northwest is no doubt an improvement on it. Like, it's so I was even reading an article recently where they said that Cary Grant's suit in North by Northwest is the most famous suit in movie history. And I think it's true, because I think it affected the way that James Bond dressed down the line, because the movie is so stylish. You see it copied in other things really well, like From Russia with Love and Dr. No. Like Dr. No, he wears a gray suit like Cary Grant. In From Russia with Love, they're on a train. You know, it's like there's these kind of homages to the story. So, and then on top of that, just the craft and the science behind the filmmaking is really, really interesting, and that, like, the score is like a great exercise in how to actually like build tension when like nothing is necessarily happening. But the opening or building tone, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is like the opening credits for North by Northwest are genius, because the way that the graphic design is happening, it's these jagged crossing lines, which scientifically, the way your brain registers that makes you kind of anxious, because it makes it a little claustrophobic, and it's just like things are getting a little smaller and smaller. And then Bernard Herrmann, I think was it Bernard Herrmann? I'm pretty sure his score is like so shrill and kind of like violins and everything. So that's kind of the tone setter, and then everything else, it just, I mean,
I love the scene where he's drunk driving, but it's again, it's taking something that's like stereotypical, like drunk driving, but he's drunk. He's not drunk because he intended to be drunk. He's drunk because he was force fed. And then he's driving while drunk because he's trying to escape from the guys who force fed him the alcohol. It's just such a interesting take on something, again, that's so stereotypical.
Well, I love when he calls his mother and he's like, yeah, you know, these guys, they fed me a whole bottle of bourbon, and no, they didn't give me a chaser. Like, it's like, you know, just, and you know, the funny thing, one of the things that I think I think North by Northwest illustrates, it might not be the best illustration because it's the most obvious, but it's one of the more updated illustrations of something that Hitchcock does a lot in his movies, is the man or the character who is in a situation that is kind of dire, but they're amongst everybody. Like they're in a populated space where everybody could, like, where you'd be usually comfortable being surrounded by people. You're not comfortable because everybody would think you're crazy or something. And there's a scene where he's literally with his mother and a bunch of other people in an elevator, two of which are the hitmen who are like trying to capture him or kill him. And he just straight up says, these men are trying to kill me, or something. Like, he says something to that degree. And everybody just starts laughing. I think actually the hitmen started off. And then everybody else starts laughing. And then his mother starts laughing. And it's this big gaslighting that's going on that other people don't even realize. But there's this symbolically in Strangers on a Train, I think the band played on in the background of when the wife is being killed. And it's once again kind of like this indicator of like, oh yeah, society's just going to do what it's going to do around you being, you know, destroyed. Like nobody cares, kind of thing. Like, it's a little bit cynical, but it's also sometimes it plays into the
reality.
Yeah. So
I was gonna just to round that off, your comment about the couple in 39 Steps versus the couple in North by Northwest, I totally agree with your point, because there was just way more chemistry between those two actors in 39 Steps versus North by Northwest. I think that's my biggest complaint, outside of, I think the ending is a little bit cheesy.
Oh, it's
But
too tongue in cheek. Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember when that happened. All the USC, like my entire class, we were watching it in theater,
yeah.
and when that happened, like everybody just erupted in laughter, and it was like, okay, Hitchcock, like, did you really have to do that? You know?
It was kind of like he's just, and now I get my big ludicrous,
Yeah,
merry-go-round exploding
yeah,
scene or whatever. But I guess my biggest complaint about North by Northwest, or besides that, is I didn't feel it between those two actors. It kind of, I don't know if it was that they were forcing it, or if they did that on purpose to kind of, I was like, what's the draw here other than like they're physically attracted? I just didn't, there wasn't like
yeah.
a connection between those two. And I just think
It's
that's really important in a movie. You got to sell it to me.
It's pretty superficial, and I mean,
Yeah.
it works in like a Bond way, and you can see how
Hmm.
North by Northwest really set the tone for the Sean Connery Bonds, because
Yeah.
Bond's relationship with women is typically pretty superficial. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a few Bonds where it's like it gets particularly deep, but this is sort of the predecessor to that. And I
Hmm.
remember I went to a screening of this where Eva Marie Saint came out afterwards, and she gave an interview, and she talked about how Hitchcock would he'd make sure that if she was drinking like coffee on set or something, it was always out of a china teacup. Like, it
Hmm.
was like she wouldn't be drinking out of a styrofoam cup or like
Yeah.
anywhere like crafty. And it was all to keep up this illusion, keep up this like, very like, I mean, basically he was dressing the characters and kind of dressing the sets to be the sexiest version of life that most
Hmm.
people would want. And this is communicated by the fact that my math teacher in community college, I remember I told her I wanted to be a filmmaker, and she was like, "Oh, when I was a child, I would watch Hitchcock films. I just imagined I would travel everywhere by train." And it was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that makes sense because
Yeah.
Hitchcock, that's how people travel, and it's very like attractive."
That
So
would be so
it's
relaxing too. Like
oh, it
I
would,
fall
yeah.
asleep on trains, so I can't sleep on like when flying, but on a train, that thing puts me to sleep. That just puts me out. Give me the train.
As long as there's
This is
not a
what I'm
murder
gonna
on
do. I'm
board
gonna do this.
Express.
I'm gonna get tickets, and I'm gonna go across the country on a train.
I mean, there
Mm.
is still an Orient Express, so you could possibly still do that. But
Mm.
I would say, yeah, North by Northwest, I just appreciate for its style.
Yeah.
And I do think that like I said, it's a bit of a knife fight between 39 Steps and that. But there's sometimes you just have to admit when the update is maybe just technically a little bit better than
Yeah.
the original, but I'd have to really kind of watch them back to back to figure it out.
Yeah. All right. So number three, I didn't quite finish it, but I was watching it this morning. Foreign Correspondent is my number three. I
Oh wow.
love this movie. Again, it's another one of those ones where I would watch it halfway, and it wasn't because I didn't want to finish it, but for
Mhm.
whatever reason, I would never finish it. So I'd get like up to the windmill stuff, and then I'd never find out what happened next. And so finally, I didn't know the name of the movie for the longest time, and I finally found it. And now I own it, and I watched it or most of it this morning, and I was just like, this is so good. There's so many
Yeah.
different things that happen. There's so many different elements, and you don't really know. So it's like this mystery. This guy goes overseas, and
Yeah.
there's this peace party over here that he's trying to get commentary on because they're about to go into war. I can't remember if it was pre-World War One or two, but I think it was
I
pre-World
think it
War One.
might have been pre-World War One. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I do remember. I think it's pre-World War One.
Yeah, because they were talking about characters that I think if it was World War II, they'd probably be a
It
little bit
it would have
more
been made just
negative
on the
on.
cusp of World War II, and I think
Hmm.
that's part of the reason the ending is the way that it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, I love that movie just because it's a mystery, but it also there's so many different facets. There's themes of assassination and also themes of attempted assassination, and then there's the whole windmill scene, which is very iconic and very weird. But then there's like they're on a plane again, and then there's they're in the ocean, and there's just all these different things. Like it's such a roller coaster, and then there's this kind of weird romantic relationship weaved into that's I think kind of funny, but I don't think it's one of the better relationships. I think it's kind of odd, but I will say Foreign Correspondent is one of the reasons why Joel McCrea is one of my favorite actors. You mentioned I mean, probably top 5, I would say. I love him in Foreign Correspondent and also in The More the Merrier. I think it's another example of you don't have to be the most good-looking guy to be a great actor or to be like the romantic lead. I think it's another one of those things about like personality trumps everything, basically.
Now you're making me curious as to what Joel McCrea actually looks like. He's not a bad looking guy. Yeah.
I know, but he's not like
well, he's not as dashing as like Cary Grant, let's just say.
Yeah, he's not what I would call traditional, I guess. Traditional Hollywood, especially of that time, perhaps. But
yeah, so by the way, it is actually World War II. And I forgot George Sanders is in it. George Sanders is like
I know.
He was in Rebecca. He was like
he's so good.
He's so good. Yeah. Anyways,
he's also in Rebecca too.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. And I remember Foreign Correspondent is always one of those Hitchcock films. I think I've watched it maybe twice.
Yeah.
And it's one of those movies that essentially I really, really like. But then there's something that kind of fizzles out about it at the end, and I can't remember exactly what. But my view on how to judge stuff has changed, so I should probably rewatch it. So this is a good reminder. But what I do remember about it is that I remember being like either the inciting incident or like the first act curtain is like amazing, like because it's essentially an assassination, and the way that they shoot it is like really, really interesting and really shocking. And then, like you said, the windmill scene is classic. And then the one thing that I just remember, if I were to change anything about it, was that at the end there's like a scene where they're being bombed and he's delivering an address.
Yeah.
And I always have issues with movies that are from World War II era that have very propagandistic endings. And that one stands out as like, oh yeah, this was kind of hijacked a little bit for propaganda, which I understand. It was 1940 and like they were trying to rally, I think the United States at the time to join up with Britain. But
I think too, Alfred Hitchcock produced a lot of just straight up pro-America propaganda at the time. So that probably was part of that.
Which, I mean, there's a charm to. And I think actually it's really not so much the substance, it's just the way that it was shot. I just remember thinking it would have been so much better if they would have been knocked over by like falling debris or something and had to hide under a table, and you would have had to have like taken the microphone under the table and like just things like that to almost make it a little less like, oh, I'm being told to how
a little more natural, I guess.
A little bit more natural. And there's, but it's kind of a product of the time, and who knows what's going on.
I do agree with you. I don't mind that ending. I was shocked to see it just because we live in such an anti-American society now. But I do think that there's an element of it kind of stands out like a sore thumb just because it seems almost disconnected from the rest of the movie.
It stands a little bit on a soapbox, but I mean, I will say, like, things like Foreign Correspondent and Secret Agent, I think that's what it's called, Secret Agent. There are some amazing sequences in them, and just because they're not on my list doesn't mean I don't appreciate them.
Oh, there's
So
so much that's not on.
my sisters all really liked Foreign Correspondent, so I had to be
Mhm.
George Sanders and Joel McCrea.
Ah,
So
George Sanders. I forgot. He's like a main staple of Hitchcock movies, particularly. There's
yeah.
so many movies that he's been in, and I still just think of him as Shere Khan from the Jungle Book. I'm not
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
lie, but that voice
You
is so
can't get over
classic.
that voice.
Yeah,
As
it's
Shere Khan, like, when he's looking at
his
whatever,
claws. Like,
claws, like, making them pop out, like, one at a
yeah,
time. It's just it's the sort of thing where you're just like, yeah, nobody else could play that character. Like,
it's one of
it's
the
so
things
perfect.
too. I know we're getting a little off topic, but it's one of the things where because Mark Hamill did this a lot when he voiced the Joker as a cartoon,
Yeah.
he would do like they'd film him while he's doing the voice, and then they'd animate the Joker doing like
Oh,
the
wow.
hand gestures that Mark Hamill was
Oh,
doing and
that's
stuff like
great.
that. So I
Yeah.
wonder how much of that is done for other
Oh,
things,
that's
like
amazing.
the
That
Shere
would be
Khan scene. I wonder if oh gosh, I just lost his name, but I wonder if the actor
George
was
Sanders.
doing that with his hands while he
Yeah.
was voicing the character.
That would be amazing. I mean, they did. I mean, that is something that animators do, and I do think. But that would be amazing to really like look at performances by actors, like really great actors, and see how much they're integrated into their animated character.
Yeah,
But that's yeah, that's I'll have to check that out.
I'm checking
But
my
yes,
list.
I have to
Okay.
rewatch Foreign Correspondent. Okay, my third is Rear Window.
Okay.
And it's because it's funny what you were saying about Rebecca. I I had one of those moments that is like I'll never forget. I remember it was senior year in high school. I think I had just finished football, so like there was really like not a whole lot to do on a Friday night. And I just was at home, and it was in October, and they were playing Rear Window on TCM,
Mhm.
and I sat down and I watched it. And there's a moment in that movie where I was like so frightened for the main character, and
Yeah.
like it almost made me sort of jump out of my seat a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's such a shock that like a movie that like old, could like kind of make you do that. But it's so well designed. The set design is amazing. They built that entire set, and it's just like a perfect example of Hitchcock kind of using mise en scene to like, you know, really tell the story. It's
Mhm.
also from somebody who's currently in law school. It's a great little treatise on privacy and
Mhm.
like your rights, and essentially like maybe how much people shouldn't be, peering into the lives of others, or even that like how much the police shouldn't be peering into the lives of others at certain
Mhm.
times, like what the morality of that is. And it doesn't give you like a morality play about it, it just poses the questions.
Right.
Grace Kelly, I think, is like phenomenal in that role.
Yeah.
Like that scene where that shot where she leans it down and kisses James Stewart while he's sleeping is like it's it's the sort of stuff that like Ralph Lauren wishes like he could come up with on his own when he
Mhm.
designs clothes. Like you can
Yeah.
tell that Hitchcock has had such an effect on society just by putting these things into film and by
Yeah.
codifying them. And beyond that, I mean, the story itself is like it's just a great thriller, and it's amazing that it's kind of static. I mean, it all
Mhm.
takes place with a character who's essentially crippled
Yeah.
temporarily, but like
And it's
I
all
don't know.
basically shot from his perspective, so what
Yeah,
he can see out the window and what he can see inside his apartment, but you never leave the apartment. You sometimes, like, there are scenes where you get closer to a
yeah,
window than he could possibly be seeing from that distance, but for the perspective is always from his viewpoint and
yeah.
from the chair or what's happening in his apartment. We don't even go into another room in his apartment. Like when Gene Kelly like will go into another room, we don't
Yeah,
follow her into the other room. We just stay with Jimmy Stewart's character the entire time,
and
which I think is really
yeah,
great.
and it builds tension so
Mhm.
well. Like, I mean, just seeing her go off and do stuff, and he's totally helpless to, you know, to help her, it just builds tension, and I just think it's yeah, it's one of I mean, it just I have to put it in my top 5 and, like, in my top 3 because it was one of the more authentic experiences of watching a Hitchcock film that I've ever
Mhm.
had. And then, I think it's also some of the better use of the color. Oh, just also just yeah, like, all the characters they're disjointed, like, none of them know him necessarily,
Mhm.
like, all these characters who live in the building, but by the end of it, it's like they all have arcs, they all, like,
Yeah.
he has an effect on their lives in many different ways, and, it's kind of beautiful in that aspect, and, it's nice, you know, it's a good hot weather movie to watch, like,
Mhm.
when our air conditioner broke down recently, and, my little brother, like, kind of beat me to it, but, like, I
Mhm.
was gonna say, like, we'd either watch 12 Angry Men or we'd watch, Rear Window,
Oh, I need to
and
watch that
Rear
again.
Window was the one to watch. So anyways, yeah, it's great. I love it.
Well, it's actually a great lead into my number 2 because my number 2 was also Rear Window. That is
Okay.
one of the 2 that I actually like you, I was so scared that ending scene. We don't need to spoil this one, but I will just say, especially because of the setting that I watched it in, I watched it over like we all went home from the office in 2018 for like Christmas break or whatever, and I drove
Yep.
home and my dad, I think, got Rear Window for Christmas, or maybe he gave it to my mom. I can't remember, but that was the first time I'd ever watched it, and it was a weird Christmas because of deaths in the family and all this stuff, and so we were just kind of like, for whatever reason, we didn't like turn the lights on when it got dark in that evening, so we watched it in the
Oh.
dark. We
Oh,
watched
wow.
it in the dark.
Yeah.
And we're all just like we're all in the room, and it's kind of a little bit more of a somber Christmas, and so we're watching this movie, and so it was just kind of the scenario that I watched
Yeah.
it in made it scarier,
Yeah.
and so then we get up to that scary ending, and it's so suspenseful, and I started yelling. I'm like, something's gonna happen, like I just started yelling in the dark. So it kind of comes down to like, I love the movies because they're great movies, but also my
Yeah.
experience watching the movie, like there's very few times when I'm actually in a movie like yelling, like pounding the armrests on the chair, like this is not okay, it's not okay. Like,
Yeah,
anyway,
that well,
so
that's pretty much I mean, I have to believe that why that is because the character is pretty much kinda helpless throughout.
yeah, he can't
Um,
get out of that chair the entire
and
movie.
I think that just builds on itself till
Mhm.
that climactic moment that we're talking about that is just like and there's like there's a special effect in that climactic moment that
Yeah.
is odd looking. It's like you know that it's not necessarily real, but it's so distinct that essentially it just works. Like it
Mhm.
communicates something to you so clearly. So that's one of the things that I really with Hitchcock and special effects is that typically whatever special effects he does actually use, they're used charmingly. Like
Yeah.
you almost like realize, oh, this is part of the experience. Okay, I'll just like I'm not going to critique that, even though like it may not be the most real looking thing. Kind of like Cary Grant running out of the UN
Mhm.
uh, in North by Northwest. It's clearly a matte painting, but it's
Right.
so interestingly done that you're like,
Yeah.
ooh, like that's cool. Like it's almost like seeing a painting. Oh, I mean, it
Yeah.
is a painting, but yeah.
So I'm glad that we're on the same page with Rear Window, but since that was my number 2, what is your number 2 now?
Oh wow, that was your number two. All right.
Yep.
Sorry, I just realized we are heading down the list.
We are.
So, my number 2 is Notorious,
Okay.
and so for a long time, I underwrote Notorious, I think because it wasn't as, like, action-packed and it was black and white, which black and white always sort of like sometimes would bias me against a film unless it was really good,
Mm.
because like I just like to see the pop of the colors, especially if it's well shot. And yeah, it just took me a long time. Like I eventually started watching Notorious, I think back in like 2017, 2016, maybe 2016. And I realized like it's one of the best spy movies like ever made. And the dynamic just there's a lot under the surface that if you just watch it initially, you might miss some of the subtleties they're playing out. Like
Mm.
especially given the restrictions at the time, it's a great example of a movie where Hitchcock is essentially communicating to you certain things about the characters that are like maybe not the most attractive things, or like would, like I think it's just implied throughout the movie that Ingrid Bergman's character is a bit of a loose woman.
Mm.
And that she's this way because she's been traumatized by the fact that her father was a Nazi spy and was probably a pretty bad guy, and that she's dealt with it by, kind of almost letting herself go and becoming like a failed romantic. And she's
Mm.
like a drunk, and it's just tragic from the outset. And you're like, wow, this is like a character who nobody would really want to get involved with. But yet, Cary Grant's character, who's very suave, and his name is Devlin in the film. And I kind of
Mm.
wonder if maybe one of the reasons that they did that was like to sort of almost show this like like this double-sided thing to his character, because he's a secret agent, he's an FBI,
Mm.
he's a government guy, and he's like almost like he's saving her, but he's also drawing her into a situation that could possibly be the end of her
Right.
through the espionage. And it's always the best thing about espionage stories, because essentially it's like the people are always wearing two faces. They're like
Mm.
they have to get the job done, but then at the same time they have to appeal to their own humanity. And
And you have to, with that, you kind of have to play it really close. Like you can never tell, or I shouldn't say never, but sometimes it's hard to tell when they're one face and when they're the other face because
right,
they play it so close all the time.
I agree. Yeah, and here you see like I think Notorious is like the best James Bond movie never made. Maybe
Mm.
outside of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, because On Her Majesty's Secret Service, despite people not liking George Lazenby, is actually rather deep. But Notorious, there's depth to the characters. You see how they're like Cary Grant in particular gives such a great performance,
Mhm.
because you see that he gets excited by this relationship with her. But then when he realizes how the FBI, I think it's the FBI, although it might actually be the CIA, is going to
Yeah,
use
because
her.
I think it's the CIA because the
It's
FBI
foreign.
isn't the FBI like United States only versus CIA is
Sometimes
overseas.
the FBI operates outside. At the time, it would have
No,
been.
does the FBI ever operate
I'm only
outside the
going.
bounds?
I'm only. I'm only going off of that Jamie Foxx movie, The Kingdom, where they sent like an FBI team out to like Saudi Arabia. But that
Oh,
might actually be because that was a bombing that happened like on like an American compound, like a little
right.
American soil away from America. But probably, let's just say they're CIA. His his attitude and the way he, like, just the way they treat each other changes when
Mhm.
they sort of realize that this is going to be like much harder, and then essentially like he has to ask her to sort of like, for lack of a better term, whore herself off,
Mhm. Yeah.
um, because to basically save kind of like the world, I guess, like because
Yeah.
the big thing is like the Nazis are up to no good in South America, and she has connections to these people because her father was a big player, and that she then has to seduce Claude Rains, who is
I love Claude
amazing.
Rains, by
Claude
the way.
Rains is one of
Oh
the
my
most
gosh.
underwritten actors because he was
Yeah.
a character actor, but he's so good in this because he makes you sympathetic towards him to a certain point. But even at the end, you feel bad for him because you kind of realize he's a bit of a pathetic character. He's like, he's a mama's boy who basically he's under the thumb of his mom, but he's trying to get out, but he realizes that he made a huge mistake, and it all leads to kind of his the end of the movie. But yeah, Ingrid Bergman is fantastic in it. It would be my favorite Hitchcock film if it weren't for the fact that I think one overtakes it in terms of meaning. So.
Well, I'm glad that so far I have seen every single one that you've thrown my way. So I feel like I did a great job of doing my homework all last summer. So we've been able to lead up to this really, really well. But before we hit number 1, I want to go back through some honorable mentions. I'm just going to throw a couple out. We've already talked about North by Northwest, but Dial M for Murder. It was so hard not to include that in my top 5. I love that movie. I love, again, it's Grace Kelly. The costuming alone is just phenomenal. And her character is just so kind of, you almost kind of don't like her character, but then, she's basically being framed for anyway. The whole thing is just like, you don't know who to root for in that movie. And it's just really kind of, I don't know. It's I don't know how to describe that movie because
I keep forgetting about that one.
Yeah, it's such kind of, it's almost kind of it's an outlier of a movie. It's not
it's such a small story. It's actually a small, it's small scale. That's one of the reasons that I think in my mind I'm more prone to leaving it out, because it basically doesn't really. I think it was all shot on a soundstage, and you even see on the exterior scenes they're using rear projection, and I think that may have been one of the reasons that I don't really think about it as being as great, because it's just sort of claustrophobic. More so,
and I wonder if that's intentional. It reminds me a little bit of Rope, which is also just shot in that one room the entire movie. In fact, I can't remember. There was like a historical thing about how there was it was done in like 12 shots or something.
I'll tell you all about it.
Okay, tell me all about Rope.
Well, I've got a couple different. Anyways, but continue. Keep going on with your honorable mentions.
Oh, okay. Jamaica Inn is just kind of wild and wacky story, and
I still have to see that. I'm a big Maureen O'Hara fan, and I think I've always stayed away from it because it just seemed like one of those early Hitchcock films that maybe he would have been finding his footing, and it wouldn't have been
it's really good. I will say the ending is kind of like, and we're done kind of thing. But I was surprised. It is a good movie. I think it's for free on YouTube if you don't have it. I had Shadow of Doubt on the list.
Modern age we live in.
I will say Notorious. I hated that, or not Notorious. Suspicion. Sorry, I get them confused. Suspicion. I hated just because she kept falling for the stupid husband, and I'm just like, he's out to kill you, obviously.
It's a really bad. Here's my view on Suspicion. I watched it several times back in the day, and I could never really get to. I like to watch it for its style, but essentially the story itself is pretty dishonest, because originally the ending was going to be that he kills her.
Yeah,
like that was the original ending to the story, and audiences, go figure, didn't really like that, because essentially it's just confirming everything you know up until that point. I mean, I don't want to say Hitchcock did kind of a bad job with Suspicion, but Cary Grant, his charm or his good looks only go so far. He's constantly like berating her, and he's doing bad things. And eventually I think the audience was smarter than Hitchcock gave them credit for. And they didn't like the ending where he kills her. So instead, they came up with 2 different endings. One of which is he goes off to war to redeem himself, and she's like waving him off, like as he flies away in his plane. And then the other is that, oh, well, it was all just in her head, and it was like, well, is that really what we want to be telling people? Is like,
That isn't
yeah, you
though.
have
That isn't the
issues.
takeaway that I had from it necessarily. My takeaway from it was that he's just going to continue to manipulate her, and it's just kind of this
Possibly.
mind control thing, or it's this endless
Yeah.
manipulation that she's now just cursed to live in for the rest of her life. That was my takeaway
I
from
have to
it.
see if I think I have the DVD at somewhere, but it's possible. It's entirely possible because one thing Hitchcock loved to do was to sort of remind people of how bad things were, even though he gave you a happy ending.
Yeah.
And like Shadow of a Doubt is a good example of that. Like at the end of the day, it's like Uncle Charlie's shadow is still very much cast over that story, even though even though the ending is what it is.
Mhm.
But yes. So Suspicion I will have to rewatch, but
I just remember feeling I was just mad at the end because I was like, and she
yeah.
continues to fall for it. She continues to fall for it. Where's my strong female character, Hollywood?
Hey, it's She-Hulk. You're just gonna have to wait till
Oh
She-Hulk
gosh.
comes out. Okay.
I'm not watching that. I will not watch that. I don't care if they're throwing Charlie Cox in there to just try to pull me back in.
Oh
No.
yeah, you're right. Yeah. No, no. No, no,
Ridiculous.
no.
Also Stage Fright I really liked, and The Man Who Knew Too Much, which was one of another example of a movie that Hitchcock made twice.
Yeah.
And I think the second time he made it was better.
True. The Man Who Knew Too Much was also, I feel like I was recently thinking about another film where I was like, oh, that's kind of The Man Who Knew Too Much.
Mhm.
But I'm blanking on what it is. I'm going to have to think about it. But okay, so before I name my honorable mentions, I'll just name my number one.
Okay.
Okay, so my number one, or wait, have you named your number one yet?
I have not named my number one
Oh,
yet.
well, go ahead and name your number one because I think
Okay.
we just went off notorious. Okay.
Okay. My number one is Psycho.
Okay.
And this is a very special movie for me because unlike most of the rest of the United States, I got to watch Psycho not knowing what the punchline was at the end of that movie. I watched that movie completely blind. I had no idea. I thought it was Norman Bates the entire time. I was blown away by the ending, and I was literally, again, just like Rear Window, I was literally screaming by the end of the movie. I'm like, what is happening? So that's why I loved that I got to experience that movie the way that I was supposed to experience. Audience were supposed to experience that movie not knowing the ending because it was such a shock. But there's
Yeah.
three specific scenes in that movie that are just iconic for the music, the way music was used instead of actual the
Oh,
sound
yeah.
of stabbing, or it's just pure fear being injected into your system through music, and not a lot of visual backup to that, which I think is great. Also the camera angles, the second like murder scene where the camera is angling
Oh,
down
yeah.
is so creepy. Everyone jumps at that
Yeah.
scene because
Yep.
no one shoots like that. No one thinks to shoot like that. So I
Yeah.
really like that. And then obviously the surprise ending was actually a surprise ending for me, and just completely shocking. And I think that that's the scariest moment in the movie, and it's because I didn't know the ending. I think a lot of people who know the ending and watch the movie for the first time probably don't agree with me, but that is my number one.
I had the ending spoiled for me on New Year's Eve, like I was in like maybe third or fourth grade. I
Oh my
remember
god.
I turned on like TCM, uh, and it just happened to be at that ending, and I was just like, "Wait, what?" And I just remember being confused, but also being like, "Well, I guess this is Psycho. I guess I've gotten this one. Guess I got that off my list." But no, I actually. So I remember I'd write, I think, a paper or at least like a full thing on Psycho, and I had
Mhm.
to totally re-examine the movie. And I will say, like that movie, it's on my runner-up list, and I think part of the reason that I don't really give it a whole lot of credit is because a lot of times my subjectivity will take over, and I don't really enjoy watching Psycho as much as other Hitchcock movies. I
Mhm.
find it's like pretty brilliant, but I just don't find it as entertaining. And
Mhm.
but I will like it's it's brilliant in its storytelling because it does show you that traditional story structure doesn't necessarily have to be the way that it is because they
Mhm.
changed the protagonist
Yeah.
halfway through the film. And that's like amazing. I mean, the guts it kind of takes to do that is pretty amazing. And then
Mhm.
just the mise en scene, the camera angles, like you said, the music, um, even the commentary on like I don't know. I think I like kind of made it into a. I remember the teacher of this film class is trying to I think make it into like some like I don't know gender theory or like queer theory
Oh
thing,
gosh, yeah.
and I kind of turned it on its head because I mean essentially it's like yeah Norman Bates is the villain of the film. I mean it's like it's unfortunate the way that it is, but you can't really be making excuses for what how
Right.
he's crazy.
Yeah.
He's a nut, and it's the sort of thing where like that's the danger at the end is that Norman Bates he's tragic, but he's the sort of character. It's like, well, what are you going to do with him? Because
Mhm.
he'll hurt people, and I mean, I haven't seen the sequels, but um, yeah, it's pretty. And once again, like Hitchcock kind of likes to remind us of the darkness with that like car being pulled out. Like that's the
Yeah.
ending of the movie, and
Yeah.
it's just it's yeah, like you said, it's I think it's a high point of Hitchcock's technical brilliance, which
Mhm.
I'm like I sometimes have a hard time synthesizing that and like kind of almost separating the story, like yeah, the ones where he's really good with story as opposed to the ones where he's like really good with the technical, and sometimes they're both. And I think
Mhm.
Psycho and North by Northwest, those are like kind of movies where he really joins them together. Um, and yeah,
Yeah, I really I think it was a great move to take prior to Psycho, Anthony Perkins, who plays Norman Bates, was more
yeah,
of a I play good guys, basically. He was like the romantic lead, or he was like the good boy or whatever. And up until Psycho, that's what his career basically was, with
yeah,
a few exceptions. And then he plays this character, and now all of a sudden he's typecast. But I think that's one of the other brilliant elements of the film is that they took somebody who is fairly clean cut, like we were talking about earlier.
unassuming, like he's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
harmless.
Almost even like childlike, like Joan Fontaine
Yeah,
in Rebecca, this very innocent looking guy with just kind of these weird quirks, and you really feel sorry for him. You think like, oh, he's being abused by this evil mother, and the
yeah,
entire movie, the first time I watched it, I thought Mother was a real character. It's kind of the same concept as Rebecca, this character who doesn't exist. Spoiler
yeah,
alert. Doesn't This character who doesn't exist overtakes the entire movie and becomes a character even though you can't see them. It's really amazing how Hitchcock is able to take non-existent characters and make them exist without any kind of visual stimulus, except for we see, early on we see like the mother's silhouette in the
yeah.
window and stuff, which is an iconic shot in and of itself. But I just think that he was able to really fake everybody out with a lot of things, especially in the beginning. I know a lot of people have it spoiled before they get to see the ending, but I did not, and I appreciate that to no
Well,
end.
and I'll also say like it's one of those great examples of a movie where like it almost the like the type of movie it is switches throughout. Like it
Mhm.
becomes like it goes from being like kind of a I don't know what you classify it as. Not like a heist thing, but like I mean, essentially, like Janet Leigh has committed a crime and
Mhm.
she's trying to escape her old life in the beginning of the movie, and that's what the movie is up until that point. But the
Mhm.
music is still very consistent, and the way the tone that they've set up is still very consistent. and it's all this sort of dread that's building and everything. And like I was talking about this recently with somebody with the movie Predator, which is like one of the classic 80s action movies, and a lot of people would just write it off as macho. But the brilliance of that movie, and with Prey, the prequel coming out recently, I was just talking about this with somebody where the brilliance of that movie is it's three movies in one. The first part is a typical Arnold action movie, and then the second part is like a horror movie, and then the third part is like a survival man versus beast kind of story. And I just love movies that can kind of switch gears like that. And I think Psycho is great. It goes from being like like it just builds upon its story. It goes from being like this crime to a detective to kind of a horror thing.
Yeah.
And it's pretty neat.
That is definitely my number one. So now I'm curious, what is Donovan's number one movie?
So my number one is, drum roll please. No, Rope.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So, okay, this is why. And I was going to put Notorious as my number one because I love watching Notorious. Notorious is one of my favorite Hitchcock films to watch. But Rope is pretty brilliant just in its story. I think the fact that, okay, everybody knows it for the one shot thing, which spoiler alert, I'm not the biggest fan of the one shot deal. I will often watch movies where people are lauding it for like, oh, it all was done in one take. Like, for example, The Revenant. Like, I remember technically, sure, it's kind of brilliant they were able to pull off some of the action scenes in one take. But maybe it's just because I'm slightly autistic. I can not really, but like I zero in on details, and I can see that there's like some weird action that's happening that's just like, oh yeah, this is a little staged. Like it's not as good as if you cut it together. I wouldn't be able to focus in on this if you had been cutting it together. Now, the Hitchcock aspect of that with the Oneer, and I think Spielberg really took from this. Like if you watch a lot of Spielberg movies, you'll notice he does a lot of stuff in one take, and it's really good because it's not drawn. It's not drawing your eye to the fact that it's just one take. It's drawing your eye to just the scene and what's happening in it, and that's just the sign of a really good scene. It's like, okay, it's like the substance within it. So with Rope, the story is so good because one, it's based on an actual case, which I studied last semester, in which these two guys, Leopold and Loeb, who were Ivy League kind of upper class, guys, young men, decided to commit like the perfect murder. And it was all based off Nietzschean ideals. And it was like, I think they killed this kid in it was after World War One, probably maybe in the 20s. I think it was in the 20s. And it shocked the world. It was like, whoa, this is weird. Why are these like clean cut upper class kids like doing this? And it was all based off of like, kind of the God is dead mentality that had been sort of creeping on society ever since nihilism was sort of introduced. And you really see that communicated in a really, really good way in this film. And I happened to see the play and the film. I think the play came first and then the film came after. And that may have possibly influenced the fact that Hitchcock did it in one take, was the fact that it was a play. But either way, you just see it's this answer to like postmodern thinking that's very, very good because Jimmy Stewart's character starts out with this very modernistic sort of relativistic view on things that like, yeah, we can't really say what's good and evil. Like, especially after World War One, I think it's implied that he's a veteran. And, he's teaching this, he's a professor, he's teaching this to his students that like, yeah, you can't really judge like essentially like, but we can make things better like than the past. Like we can through progressivism, we can like push forward and like through our will, we can make things better. And the murderer, one of the murderers, I think is his student. And he invites him to this party specifically
Mhm.
because, you know, they have this connection. And you just see how the turn of events and Jimmy Stewart's realization that of what they've done totally develops his character to realize that there's like an objective moral good and evil in the universe, and that ultimately you kind of have to own up to that. You have to let go, and like justice has to be done by that. And there's
Mhm.
such a powerful ending where he has this like it's really just like a total, you know, kind of conclusion on that topic of like, yeah, you've done the worst thing and now you're gonna die because of it. Like he
Yeah.
says that. Like he's just like, now you're gonna die. And it's like it's actually a pretty good argument for the death penalty to a certain degree. Like, I mean, and granted, like there's you can have that conversation, but it brings it to that place of like realizing like, oh yeah, there's and then on top of that, just to kind of cap off my initial thing with it, there's great design of the set because
Mhm.
Hitchcock knew that if you're gonna have one shot, you have to have like good kind of set design. He does this great thing where out their window is like a great skyline of New York City, and it all kind of plays in thematically, I think, with the like the rise of industrial kind of like that Art Deco kind of style of like, yeah, we can do anything, like just up and up and up and up, like
Mhm.
skyscrapers, and like everybody's dressed nice. The the place, I mean, it's kind of hard to spoil it because it's like it's kind of the beginning of the movie, but
Yeah.
essentially there's a body in the room and
Yeah.
nobody knows it's there. And the way that he sets up that set piece is very anti-Christian, which
Mhm.
in its way, like obviously coming from a Catholic viewpoint, I was able to spot it, but Hitchcock was also Catholic. And
Mhm.
this is where I was like, oh, I see what he's doing. Like I see
Mhm.
because essentially they hide the body in a trunk.
Yeah.
They invite all these people over, including the victim's parents.
Mhm.
They lay out a tablecloth over the trunk
Mhm.
and they put like candlesticks and like all these like silver, like kind of party dressings on it to serve
Yeah.
people. And it's all a perversion of the
Yeah.
mass and a
Yeah.
perversion of like Christ's sacrifice that takes place in the mass. And it's so evil, but it's so meaningful in that you realize, oh, they've just like their goal is to totally like subvert that.
Mhm.
And I just in terms of meaning and like what the real meaning is of the story, Rope is, I think, one of the most satisfying stories out of Hitchcock's lineup. And I partly because it delves into the deepest, darkest kind of desires of humans, which are based on reality through that Leopold and Loeb story, but then it reconciles it with Jimmy Stewart's character, who was very cynical at the start, but ends
Mhm.
up being actually believing something at the end.
So the thing about Rope for me is my experience viewing it wasn't the best just because I was entertaining, and so I missed most of the bulk of the movie. I saw
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
basically I saw the beginning, I saw bits and pieces, and then I saw the ending. And so I
yeah.
need to go rewatch it again to get like the full impact. You're kind of selling me on it. I was just mad by the end. I was like, I didn't get to watch any of it, but so I need to
There's
go back and rewatch.
there's also a great like dynamic between the characters, like one of the guys who one of the murderers is the guy who's the main character in Strangers on a Train.
Mhm.
And the way that he acts is just like I remember my roommates and I were sitting there watching it, and like at one point, like the more extroverted of the two is like
Mhm.
trying to win Jimmy Stewart over when he
Uh,
kind of realizes when they both realize they've gone too far and that he's too smart to like kind of oversee what they've done. And
mhm.
like he's trying to offer him a drink the whole time. And
Yeah.
like the guy in the background is just brooding the entire time. He's just like, he said you could have it. Like it's just like you'll see what I mean. But like it's one of those moments where I just remember breaking out laughing because it is just like it's nice to see bad people in kind of a uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
But
I don't
yeah,
remember what's the name of that actor, because he made
oh,
me, even though he didn't
Granger,
yeah,
something Granger.
even though he doesn't commit the crime in Strangers on a Train, he acts so guilty throughout
He
that movie.
does.
He acts as
Yeah,
if
yeah,
he
he's
was the
very
one who did it.
belabored.
Yes,
Well,
yeah.
and I think that's what works really well. He's kind of unlikable in Strangers on a Train, and I can see why he never
Mhm.
is it Harley Granger? Anyways, he is kind of unlikable, but you get where he's coming from because
Yeah.
he's going through divorce and he feels bad about, the fact that like he's doing this. Like it's like he just feels bad that his life is sort of falling apart to a certain
I think
degree.
I think too, though, he does a great job of, he feels guilty not because he committed the crime, but because he wanted to commit the crime, basically. Because his,
Yeah,
not only was he just going through a divorce, but also his wife had been cheating on him. She was
yeah.
having a child with another man, all this
She
other
was
stuff, and
divorced,
he
and
was
she had
that, and she had
and we
glasses.
can all agree that people with glasses are just off. No, I'm kidding. I don't
Don't you
really.
wear glasses, though?
So on occasion, yes. Geez, way to just parade my personal life around there,
I'm sorry.
Kelly.
I'm just like, I'm pretty sure I've seen you in glasses. I need glasses. You may end up seeing me in
Warby
glasses
Parker. That's
in
the
the
place
years
to
to come. But yes. So
get 'em. Yes,
just to round things off, I want to hear any honorable mentions that you may
runners
have.
up. Okay, so Rebecca would be my number one because
Hmm.
Rebecca will always hold a special place in my heart. It's very much like romantic storyline, and I like the gothic aspect, like we talked about. 39 Steps,
Hmm.
I still would put that up against North by Northwest just for the story. And if I were to really re-examine them next to one another, it's possible it would edge out North by Northwest,
Hmm.
but just North by Northwest's impact on film culture and entertainment was like huge. So I kind of gave it to North by Northwest.
Hmm.
Lifeboat is a great like Ship of Fools, like literally movie. And
Hmm.
it's not very often talked about, but I love Lifeboat. Um To Catch a Thief, I really like watching because it's
Hmm.
got great scenery. Grace Kelly really annoys me in that movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's a little bit of a
Yeah.
child, but I think
Yeah.
she's written to be that way. It's not her fault necessarily
Yeah.
because she's great in Rear Window and
Yeah.
Dial M for Murder. But in that movie in particular, I'm a little like, yeah, Grace Kelly, you're kind of the weak point of this.
I
But
didn't really feel like she was utilized to the full extent that she could have
yeah,
been in that
there's a
movie.
lot in that movie that I think is just like I'm not saying like it's just for the scenery or anything, but you can tell
Mhm.
Hitchcock, I think, is having fun kind of shooting certain things and
Mhm.
giving you like kind of a sexy experience.
Mhm.
Um, and then I would say Psycho is the last because of its technical, like the structural aspects of it and the technical aspects of it, I think are just so hard to ignore.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Well, I think that this has been a fantastic breakdown, and like I said, this is the last set of opinions that are acceptable
yes, yes.
regarding Alfred Hitchcock. You will never hear better commentary on this.
It's the
This is
final word.
It is the final word. I should that may end up being my title. I'm going to steal that from you. So, thank you guys all for watching. I really hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. And please leave your top 5 Alfred Hitchcock movies in the comments section below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell to get notifications, and comment below what you guys thought in addition to your top 5. And I will talk to you guys on the next video.